So you're playing Genshin, you do a 10 pull, and you get 5-star Ineffa. Now, what do you get with Ineffa besides Genshin's own Roomba? Well, Ineffa is a polearm wielding Electro user who adds a new reaction to the game. Adds a new reaction is kind of a mislabeling. It turns a reaction into something else. And in this video, we're going to look at the basics of Ineffa. Now, since Ineffa is brand new, this is not going to be like a niche team kind of video. This is in fact going to be just a regular standard basics guide on Ineffa. Now, here is where I would normally do an ad read, but I'm not doing sponsors right now. I've taken a break from sponsors to make myself the sponsor. So if you enjoy these videos, make sure you like and subscribe and follow and all of that fun stuff. Now let's get into Ineffa. Not that way, guys. Don't make this weird. So Ineffa's normal attacks are going to do normal physical damage. There's nothing special about that. She does swing her vacuum cleaner around on her charge attack. That's like the coolest thing about her autos. So now we're going to look at her skill. Her skill is going to summon her own little helper robot, and this is going to do off-field coordinated electro damage. This is also going to give your on-field character a shield that scales with Ineffa's attack. Now, like I said, this little robot does do coordinated off-field electro damage, so if we swap to another character, then it will continue to do this electro damage. Now, if we cause an electro-charged reaction with somebody like Xingqiu, we are going to get what is called a lunar-charged reaction. Now, I did do a video kind of explaining the difference between electro-charged and lunar-charged, so if you want to scroll down and check that out, it should be the last video that I posted. But no, real quick, if Ineffa is in the party, it is going to convert electro-charged into lunar-charged. You can no longer do electro-charged reactions with her in the party. You will always do lunar-charged. She doesn't even have to be the one that is doing the reaction. The main difference being that lunar-charged can crit, electro-charged cannot. And it is depicted by this cloud that you can see kind of over enemies. And anytime that an electro-charge reaction would occur, it will be converted into a lunar charge. So that's kind of where we're going to leave that reaction. Again, scroll back, find my last video, watch that for a little bit deeper explanation. Now, this does work with her first passive, where if there are thunderclouds created by the lunar charge reaction nearby, whenever her little robot unleashes discharge attacks, she'll initiate an additional attack, dealing AoE electro damage equal to a certain percentage of her attack. This is considered lunar charge damage. So you're going to see kind of two instances of electro damage hit whenever we cause a lunar charged attack, even if she is off the field, as long as her little robot is on the field. So you're going to see multiple instances of electro damage come down whenever that happens. Now, we will go ahead and look at her second passive before we talk about her burst, because it deals with her burst. When using her burst, all of your party members will gain an effect that is going to increase Ineffa and your own active party members' elemental mastery by 6% of her attack. So just like her shield scales off of attack, this also scales off attack. So it's a really good indication as to how we want to build her. However, there is a caveat which we'll talk about. Now, she does also have like a third passive, which is that when a party member triggers an electro charge reaction, it will be converted into the lunar charge reaction. So this is actually what makes her do the lunar charge reaction. With every 100 attack that Ineffa has, increasing this lunar charge base damage by 0.7% up to 14%. So this is going to be a 2000 attack break point. That is where this break point comes from with her attack. Now, speaking of her burst, it is going to do an instance of AoE electro damage and put her robot on the field. However, it is not going to apply the shield. So you do want to make sure that you're using her skill to get that shield, because her skill does have a permanent uptime where the cooldown is shorter or the same as the uptime. So we can have a permanent uptime with the Ineffa robot, but using her burst will refresh that robot duration. It will not give you a new shield, but it will refresh her robot's duration, as well as doing that instance of electro damage. And then, of course, applying that second passive. Now, as far as her kit goes, that's kind of it. She is relatively simple. The biggest thing about her kit is that she allows for the lunar charged reactions. Now, I am expecting that as more characters come out for like Nodcry, then it is going to increase the lunar charge damage, or we're going to have more characters that allow for lunar charged. Ineffa, I'm thinking, is just going to be like the first in many characters that are going to allow that, or their kit's going to kind of revolve around it. Now, something that I do want to say and kind of point out about the lunar charge reaction, it doesn't work like Emily with burning. Whenever Emily came out, it gave a resurgence to the burning reaction, right? But it did not buff or change the burning reaction. Emily uses the burning reaction to buff herself, as well as using the artifact set and all of this stuff. That is not what Ineffa is doing. Ineffa is taking Electro-charged and turning it into Lunar-charged. She is not necessarily using Electro-charged reactions to buff herself. She is changing the Lunar-charged reaction. She is buffing the reaction of Electro-charged to Lunar-charged versus using Electro-charged to buff herself. So she does not quite work like Emily, so keep that in mind. So now let's talk about an artifact set for Ineffa. You might be thinking that if her shield scales off of attack and a lot of stuff scales off of attack, then we want to invest a ton of attack into her. That is not necessarily the case. If you look at the artifact set on Ineffa in this trial, it is actually going to be Gilded Dreams, which is an elemental mastery set, which this is one of her best sets, as well as Thundering Fury. This is going to give her elemental mastery in the 2-piece. The 4-piece is going to increase her attack and elemental mastery depending on the different elements in your party. But we still need elemental mastery on her because Lunar-charged scales with elemental mastery. Her buffing and her shield scale with attack, and one of her buffs does max around 2k attack. But we still need elemental mastery on her so that way she can do more damage through the Lunar-charged reaction. So Gilded is going to be really, really good because it's going to buff EM and attack. Now, for the main stats, you're going to notice that they did an EM Sands, an attack goblet, and a crit rate circlet. You can also change your EM Sands to an attack Sands, and then your goblet to an EM goblet, depending on what you kind of need to do to get the 4-piece, or whichever one has your better substats. So make sure you keep that in mind, that you can do EM on the goblet or the Sands, and attack on the opposite one. And then of course crit rate or crit damage on a circlet, depending on what you need more of. And this is going to be the same thing if you run like Thundering Fury. Now, for weapons, of course, her signature weapon, Fractured Halo, is going to be her best. It's going to give crit damage. And then after using her skill, it's going to give her an attack buff. And then if they create a shield while this effect is active, then it is going to get an increase in Lunar-charged damage. Now, one thing that is very interesting is that this, as we get further and further into the game, where I feel like our signature weapons are going to get much, much more specific to the character that they're intended for, whereas they might not be as usable as other characters. Like outside of Ineffa, I feel like I'm trying to, like, off the top of my head, the only characters that are polearm users that make a shield, I believe, are Zhongli, Toma, and then maybe Yunjin. I think Yunjin also makes a shield. So you would have to have this polearm on one of them 3, which, you know, you're not really going to be using Toma with Ineffa. Like Yunjin maybe, depending, maybe, and like an Ineffa, a Yato, kind of electro-charged, lunar-charged thing where you're trying to make Yunjin give a Yato an increase in attack speed, or like Zhongli, then maybe you can do it then. It's going to increase his attack, not his HP, so like that's not going to be a huge thing. Like, but also if you are using this, if you have this weapon, then you're specifically trying to do it for the Lunar-charged reaction, which would go to Ineffa anyway. I don't know that this weapon is usable on other people per se, is kind of what I'm saying. Or if it is, it's going to be much more limited to who can use it. So just keep that in mind if you're trying to pull for this weapon. Now, the good thing though about Ineffa is she can use a ton of polearms, because you really want either a crit rate, a crit damage, an attack, or an EM. So you have a ton of options for her. You have like Sino Signature, you have Engulfing Lightning, you have Staff of Homa, you have Calamity Queller, you have Skyward Pride, you have Vortex Vanquisher, you have Primordial Jade Winged Spear. You have a lot of 5-star polearms that Ineffa can use. Now, if you are going to use something like Engulfing Lightning, then of course you're going to be running like an ER instead of an attack Sands, because it's going to convert the ER into attack. So at that point, yes, you will be running like an ER Sands and then an EM Goblet. For 4 stars, you do have the Kitaian Cross Spear from Inazuma, the Inazuma craftable weapon, which is actually a phenomenal option for her. You also have Ballad of the Fjord, Deathmatch, Dragon's Bane, Favonius Lance. You have a lot of options that you can use on Ineffa. So if you get Ineffa and you don't get her signature, you still have a lot of options, which are going to be really, really good. I think in that entire list, I would put Favonius Lance at the very, very bottom. Now, Ineffa is a character that I did actually pull for a little bit. I lost my 50-50 around like 82 pity, I think. So I'm going to save that guaranteed for the Dendro characters that are going to be coming up from Nodcry, because as you guys know, I collect Dendro characters like Pokemon cards. So I'm going to go more for that than going for Ineffa, but on Ineffa's rerun, I'll probably try to get her, especially if I can get a Yato, because I really, really, really want to run like a Yato, Oreo, Ineffa, Taser team. I guess it'd be a Lunar-charged team at that point. I would love to do something like that. I'd love to use a Yato in kind of a tasered Lunar-charged team. So when Ineffa reruns, I will most likely be going for her, specifically to run her with a Yato. I guess I need a Yato to rerun because I didn't do any pulling on the Inazuma Chronicle banner, so I still need to get him too. But that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure you comment, like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Kuki has green hair. I have green hair in this model, and I will see you in the next one.